Welcome into Fantasy Focus. Today's live stream is presented by EA Madden NFL 22. You can watch us every weekday at 11 a.m. on ESPN's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube page, as well as the ESPN app. And if you're listening to the audio feed, today's podcast is presented by Geico. You can download Fantasy Focus wherever you get your podcasts. Field Yates, Matthew Berry, Stephania Bell here today. Wait a second. Guys, I have terrible news.
What's that?
I feel so bad to say this.
Okay.
This is pretty serious.
I'm listening.
Field Yates asked for the day off. It's the
What?
first time in 5 years that he's ever asked for a day off during
human.
football season.
He's been
During
sitting
football
next to
season.
Matthew
Yeah.
for too long.
I think
It's
it
really
took
what's
5
happened.
years for Matthew to rub off on
listen,
the field.
I mean, I'm just going to say whatever. I mean, like, you guys know I'm a Jewish man. It is Rosh Hashanah today.
It
Shana
is.
Tova to everyone out there that celebrates. I'm working. High holidays, I should actually be off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you know what? Fields whatever. He's boondoggling.
He's taking a page out of Stephania's
Yeah, exactly. He's boondoggling with his lovely wife, Chapin. And so, yeah, whatever. I'm here on the high holidays. But you know what? I'm just saying, like, one of us has a work ethic and one of us is Field Yates.
And
Just
that's I think Stephania's the one with the work ethic.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, I've been here.
Stephania is legitimately the hardest working person on the show.
Yeah,
Right,
definitely.
because when I was
Definitely.
supposedly boondoggling, remember, I was working
Yeah.
to provide information for the people. It's what I do.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's
what it was.
like what kind of wine to get when you're in
I actually
Sonoma.
found a really good restaurant in Cincinnati, courtesy of Ben Baby.
Sure.
At Ben Baby, right? Isn't that his handle? It's either Ben Baby or Ben_Baby. He's your Joe Mixon update person, but he also can recommend really good restaurants in downtown Cincinnati.
What he actually is he covers the Cincinnati Bengals for us. He's an NFL Nation reporter.
That is
Thank
true.
you. You know, in addition to like doing the bidding of Stephania, like like I'm over here trying to cover the Bengals. Stephania's like, no, tell me where to eat.
That is
Whatever. But
We
sounds
also
fine.
talked about the offensive line and,
Blah, 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 blah,
Chase,
blah, blah.
whatever. But
You know what?
Yeah.
Speaking of offensive line, let's get into some football real quick. We got plenty of
Who
stuff we can talk
decided
about
that Daniel
today.
should be in the host chair? Like, where's Mike Clay? Could have been Starfania. Could have been me. You decided?
I did.
You pulled like the Jeopardy executive producer where you made
exactly
yourself
what
the host, just like you're
I
like
am
the
in
Mike
the
Richter.
producer chair, though, so you never know what could happen.
Exactly. I put
fair
Stephania, the smartest person in the room, in the producer chair. I thought that was the right decision. I left you where you're at because,
Yes. Because I finally
got
learned.
one lane.
I
You're
got
like-
one lane. Exactly. Don't make me deviate. Just like, okay, sit there and talk, monkey.
We're lucky you got here on time, much less, sat
You're
in the
right.
chair.
That's so-
wrong because your name is wrong.
Actually
chair.
correct.
Actually
Wrong
correct.
chair. All right, let's talk some football. Hey, it is week 1.
Yeah,
it
it is.
week 1 of the NFL season. We've got games on Thursday night. We have a full slate of games on Sunday, and of course Monday night here on ESPN. I'm a company man. Stephania.
Gosh. You put her in the producer chair for 1 day.
Good job, Princeton.
Here
Anyway,
to look good on camera, and I can actually see the screen. I'm so excited because I have a return monitor today, so I can see things. I can read the chyrons.
no one at home listening to this knows what you mean by a return monitor.
Everyone's super excited.
Explain.
We do this for people who are not aware, and I'm sure everyone's aware. We do this show in front of cameras live every day on social media, like on Twitter, YouTube, the ESPN app, ESPN Fantasy app, ESPN's Facebook page, blah, 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 blah. All right, so it's like a zillion different places. So we do it in front. It's basically a TV show. It's basically an hour-long TV show without commercials.
That's true.
It's amazing I haven't been fired yet.
I agree with that.
But at any rate, so we do that, and then, of course, there's an audio product to it as well. And so when we are broadcasting, there is a monitor that you guys cannot see at home, but that we can see so that we know what you guys are watching. So the people that are watching the stream or that might see the video clips us talking about a certain player when they're in the ESPN Fantasy app or they're on ESPN.com. So we have what is called a return monitor so that we can see what you people at home are seeing. Stephania's seat in the studio, because we're in a small studio and because of COVID and wanting to be, socially distant and, and follow proper protocols, Stephania unfortunately does not have a return monitor in her little corner of the studio.
Yeah.
But today, because she's in your seat, she does get one.
Correct.
So she's very excited.
Super excited.
To me, she's putting a positive spin on it, but to me, it's more of a spotlight on the fact that you haven't figured out how to get her a return monitor yet, Daniel.
I've been working on it. Well, hey, budgets are tight, Matthew, and
Just whatever. Send an email, for the love of God. Fire up an email.
That's not how it works. That's not how it works. All right, let's talk about this.
Yeah, what do we got?
Zach Martin out for week 1. If you don't know Zach Martin, obviously lineman for the Dallas Cowboys. I guess really the first question here, Stephania, I want to come to you. Is there any reason to have long-term concern here, obviously, with Zach Martin, and also Brandon Knight is a close contact out as a part of the COVID protocol?
Well, I think, obviously we are concerned for Zach Martin's health. My understanding is that he's doing better, but people are a little bit confused because there are different protocols for fully vaccinated players versus those who are not fully vaccinated. And Zach Martin did contract COVID-19, tested positive, although he was fully vaccinated, and he actually exhibited flu-like symptoms and a loss of taste when he was tested on Saturday. And that is part of the reason that the projection was for him to be out on Thursday, because you have to be asymptomatic and have consecutive days of negative testing. So the window, especially given a Thursday night game, was too close for comfort for the Cowboys. So again, a daily process, but the hope would be that potentially he's back as soon as week 2.
Okay. Matthew, does that change your rankings or the way that you're looking at Ezekiel Elliott or any of the Cowboys offense going into this week?
Not really. It's a tough matchup, obviously, against Tampa Bay. It's one of the best defensive lines in the NFL. And look, would you rather Zach Martin be out there? Of course. But Zeke still has, as good touchdown equity as any running back in the NFL. He still is going to be involved in the passing game. I mean, I think people forget how often Zeke, at least we expect him to be involved in the passing game here. And I'd be shocked if you had a better option than Ezekiel Elliott. Like, Ezekiel Elliott went, as a top 7 player in every draft.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine sitting here going like, well, week 1, my first round pick. Like, the reason you draft somebody in the first round is because those are people that you feel like you should start no matter what, day in, day out. Like, we're going to get this question about Saquon Barkley. And I have concerns about Saquon Barkley this upcoming Sunday, right? And I know Stephania does as well, even with the expectation that he plays. But is it limited snaps? And it's a tough matchup. And that's why I had Saquon Barkley outside my top 10. I didn't have him as a first rounder this year. But if you drafted Saquon Barkley in the first round, then you're starting him because you, by drafting him that high, believe in him. And I'm talking about the royal you, like the people out there, the collective you.
Yes.
So yeah, no, you're starting Zeke. You're starting Ezekiel Elliott. And if you are not starting Ezekiel Elliott because Zach Martin is out, you've made a horrible first-round pick. This was a massive mistake. What were you doing, people?
What were you doing?
What were you doing?
All right.
I will just say this. I have Ezekiel Elliott in the moment and in 2 leagues, and we'll see because I have 7 drafts to go.
Wow.
Between now and Sunday morning. So I may wind up with him in more leagues than that. But I have him on 2 different leagues, and he's starting in both those leagues for me, including the league you and I are in the Fantasy Show League.
Yep. And I'm going to crush you in that league.
You were absolutely not. You say that every year, and then every year I win that league. So
whatever.
I've won 2 out of the last 4 years.
I've actually, okay. Let's move off that.
Just saying, I've actually won the league. I've had the highest points in
Look at
3 of the last 4. I'm just saying,
let's move on from that. I love this.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to be Daniel. One other thing about the Cowboys, I do want to point out, they may have Lael Collins back. He did return to practice. That's big. He's right tackle, and if he's in there, that's some extra measure of protection. Connor McGovern going to start at right guard in place of Zach Martin.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So here's what we're going to do for the rest of this show today, Matthew Berry. This was obviously one of the biggest.
That's not it? We're not done?
No, we are not done. I'm sorry. This is one of the biggest draft weekends of the year that we just passed. So obviously with that happening, a lot of people get drafted, and we talk every single year about who gets drafted, who doesn't get drafted. And normally our Tuesday show is our waiver wire column. Now, obviously, with it being week 1, we don't really have a waiver wire. But there's a lot of people that after looking at drafts, we want to be able to look and see what you think about whether or not these people either should be on rosters or if there are people that were drafted that maybe you could let go of based on some higher upside for people that are out there.
All righty.
Cool. We're going to start with quarterbacks, and I want to start with the rookies because the rookies are just always exciting to talk about. Trevor Lawrence right now has been drafted in about 75% of leagues, which, in ESPN 10-team standard leagues feels about appropriate to me, I guess.
All right.
Does that seem fair?
Sure.
All right. I want to know with Justin.
I'm agreeable today.
I know you are. I appreciate it.
Well, you know what it is? It's the Tuesday of week 1.
Yeah.
I'm in I'm in happy mode. The season hasn't beaten me down.
This
is why the schedule hasn't grinded me to a nub yet.
Feel Jason's missing out. He could have had agreeable Matthew, but
agreeable happy Matty.
All right. So
we don't often see that.
No, we don't. Well, every once in a while.
Every once in a while.
Once in a while.
Yeah, what do you got?
Both Fields and Lance, rookie quarterbacks that we both like as the season progresses, and both of them were drafted in less than 50% of leagues, Matthew Berry. My question is, with these two rookies who do not have instant starter capability in fantasy, are they worth going out and picking up off of your waiver wire right now if they are available?
I believe so. It obviously depends on your quarterback situation. It depends on your bench, the size of your bench, what flexibility you have. But I believe both guys are going to be, top 12 fantasy quarterbacks with potential to be really special once they become starters, especially Lance.
Yeah.
I prefer Lance to Fields, but I think both guys, and it's more about the situation that they're in, the team that they're around. 49ers is going to be really good.
Yeah.
I hate to say
Excuse
it.
me. What?
Yeah.
What was that?
You
I
heard
didn't
me.
hear. No, I didn't because too many
thanks
times
for
on
paying
this
attention.
podcast.
You missed it. You had a chance. Stephania, thanks for listening.
Many times on this podcast, I've heard about once good, then terrible. So when you say they're going to be good, you have to say it more than once.
No, I actually don't. I'm going to move on. So I'm going to answer the question that Daniel asked me, which is what a good analyst should do.
Yeah.
So, yes, I do believe they should be picked up. And in fact, again, if you have Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, and I know the argument is like, well, I have Patrick Mahomes as my quarterback. Like, they're never starting for me, which I get. But they could start for somebody else. And if they're on your team, then you can trade them. Like, it's all about improving your roster and having assets to either start or trade to build up other areas of your team that may not be as strong. So I think those two guys, Fields and Lance, have as much upside as any current free agent in more than 50% of ESPN leagues.
Yeah, agreed.
They do.
Agreed.
So, yes. I mean, I rank them both as being draftable. Both made my love list, my preseason love list. In a word, yes. If they are available in your league, I think they are worth grabbing and stashing.
I think in most ESPN standard 10-team leagues, there's always one or two guys at the end of the bench that if you drafted well, right? When I look back at my team and I feel pretty good here.
Yeah.
There's at least one or two guys that I feel like, all right, you know what? I can let go of this guy knowing that the rest of my bench is in a good spot and I'm grabbing this guy for the long term. So
I ran into somebody at a restaurant last night and he asked me to look at his team. And so I'm looking at the team and his quarterback was Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
But he also had Matt Ryan. And I was just like, what are we doing? And it's the same thing. It's like a 10-team, one quarterback league. What are we doing with Matt Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no upside to Matt Ryan. Nope. And, like, you have Lamar Jackson. You're never not starting. Like, I take it back. He had Dak. He had Dak Prescott. And I just said, right, if Dak gets hurt, you're done anyways. Like, so, we looked at the bench and I said, drop Matt Ryan for somebody else. And so that's what I would say. Like, if you have like a second tier quarterback like that doesn't have a lot of upside, what are we doing? But somebody like Trey Lance, somebody like Justin Fields has significant upside. So yes, I do think they should be rostered in a lot of leagues.
All right, short question, short answer. Baker Mayfield was drafted in 65% of leagues. Is he actually worth rostering in 10-team ESPN standard leagues?
I don't mind drafting him. I like him. But no, I wouldn't pick him up the way that we're talking about with Lance and Fields. If you have a starting quarterback. Now, it's interesting. This guy was a top 12 fantasy quarterback over, I think, from week 12 on, something like that. I want to say, Thirsty Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong on this stat. I believe the stat is from week 12 on last year, he was a top 7 fantasy quarterback. I believe that's correct. That's off memory. So, like, we've seen Baker perform at a high level, but just, they're going to be run heavy. It's a good defense. Like, I don't know if they're going to get in that many shootouts. So, Baker Mayfield's one of those guys, like, I could easily see him being like one of the first big pickups, but I don't know that you need to roster him in a 10-team, one quarterback league.
Sure.
If you have a starter.
If I was in a 10-team, one quarterback league and I had a starter and it wasn't Baker Mayfield, I would drop Baker Mayfield for either of the two rookies that we just talked about.
I agree with that too.
Okay. Oh, I like it when Matthew Berry agrees with me.
Sure.
Here's another question. Tua, Matt Ryan, Big Ben, Jameis Winston, Kirk Cousins, Ryan Fitzpatrick. All of these are late-round quarterbacks. They were all rostered in less than 50% of leagues. Is there one that you like more than the rest? It's okay if you don't have one that you like more. And is there one that you think needs to be rostered in a 10-team league? This is like, I waited super late on quarterback, and this is who I was able to grab. Who of these is your favorite?
It's Ryan Fitzpatrick, and not just because he's a dead ringer for you, and not just because he plays for my Washington football team, my beloved Washington football team.
Fair.
Homer.
He played, Stephania, he had 7 starts last year.
7.
He had 7 starts. He averaged 19.9 fantasy points per game.
19.9.
In those 7 starts, would have been QB 11 on a points per game basis
11.
last year. Now he comes to Washington, where he has Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, Antonio Gibson, a good offensive line, a fantasy-friendly play caller in Scott Turner, who's going to be creative. So I'm just saying, like, he's surrounded. I would argue that Ryan Fitzpatrick has the best offensive weapons and system around him that he's ever had in his career. And we have seen Ryan Fitzpatrick, when he gets a chance, whether it was in Miami last couple of years, whether it was in Tampa Bay when he was splitting time with Jameis Winston, even when he was with the Jets and Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker, he was productive fantasy-wise. And so, again, really good skill set here. I think he's playing at a high level at this point in his career. And by the way, he's had multiple the last 3 seasons where he's started at least 12 games, he has multiple rushing touchdowns in all of them. A little more scoot than he gets credit for. Like, he ain't Josh Allen. You know what I mean? Like, he's not Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, but, like, he's also not like Ben.
Correct.
So, yeah, Ryan Fitzpatrick is who I like the most. That's the question I was asked of those quarterbacks who I like the most. Who do you like the most? Star Fania Bell?
Well, you just said his name, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. And while you might be laughing, just think he only had 1 preseason game appearance, but he completed 8 out of 10 passes, 2 touchdowns, 137 yards. It was against the Lions, so, you know, there's that. Sorry, Daniel. But there's a lot to like about Ben Roethlisberger. I think this narrative of him having lost the deep ball was a little overplayed last year. Yes, he was coming off major elbow surgery, and yeah, it took him a while to get into his rhythm. But there were times where you could see that he could throw the ball well. And I am told that his metrics, all these things that the team captures, the data that looks at volume, distance, speed on the ball, etc., it was the same as pre-injury. So it was not this narrative that it was his arm and it wasn't the same. That wasn't it. Now, they didn't play as well last year. His receivers dropped a league high 39 passes. So that did not help his stats. But he still was quarterback 13 on a points per game basis. That's just 2 behind your beloved Ryan Fitzpatrick. And that includes 5 weeks as a top 10 option. I like Ben as somebody you can stream. Might not be week 1 against the Bills, but I like him as an option, certainly as a second quarterback.
I just think their offense is going to look totally different than it did previously.
I think
it's just going to be, they had no run game last year, so they had to pass all the time. And Ben, and despite the fact that they passed all the time last year, Ben, QB 13 on a points per game basis, like, you know, sort of bare. Like, I don't know that anyone like felt like anyone that had Ben Roethlisberger as their starting quarterback last year doesn't feel like they got a great fantasy performance. Like,
yeah, but it's not last. That's the whole point. It's not last year. It's this year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With Najee Harris, I think they're going to be more run heavy. They're more prone to go run when they get in close. I actually think his numbers go down this year.
I don't think they go down from last year.
He's injury prone.
All right, let's do it. Let's do a board bet.
Yeah, I will do 1,000% a board bet.
Ben Roethlisberger's numbers go down this year or not go down this year?
I'm gonna say.
I know you're going to say.
Ryan Fitzpatrick. I say more fantasy points this year. Ryan Fitzpatrick or Ben Roethlisberger. I say Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I say Ben Roethlisberger. Put it on the board.
Put it on the board. All right, cool. I don't know. We don't have a drop for it.
No, but
Stephania's
you know
gotta be
what?
the one that does
You sounded old-timey prospector there.
Put it on the board.
You did.
Yeah, okay.
So, I've told this story before. Like, when we did the fantasy show and we cast Daniel as the co-host, the idea was that Daniel could play a lot of different characters. And what we have quickly learned is that it does not matter what hat we put on Daniel, what outfit we put on him, what we tell him to do. Every character sounds like an old-timey prospector, which is the only one you can do. So it's literally like, we're like, hey, play a French maid. He's like, howdy, y'all. And you're like, what are you doing? Like,
French maid.
Yeah,
okay.
like, I mean, like, we've had him do everything.
Yeah.
Stephania, we've had him do everything on that dumb show. And
I reckon you should have done a better job in casting then.
And true that.
You know, Stephania, just the last point. My favorite part, you said that Ben Roethlisberger had that big game in the preseason against the Lions. My favorite part about being a Lions fan is fantasy football. Now is the time to celebrate.
Okay.
The NFL is finally back, and Draftkings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL, has millions of reasons why you should be excited. To kick off the football season, Draftkings is giving new customers a free shot at a $1 million top prize with a total of $4 million up for grabs for Thursday's opener. Getting in on Thursday night's single game showdown is easy. Draft 6 players from the season opener, stay under the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition. So head to the app now. Feel the NFL action like never before with a free shot at $1 million payday. Download the DraftKings app now and use the code FFF this week. New customers can get a free shot at the $1 million top prize and $4 million in total prizes. $4 million. Enter code FFF to get a free shot at the $1 million top prize with your first deposit. That's code FFF only at DraftKings, the official daily fantasy partner of the NFL. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details.
Fantasy football right around the corner. That means more of what you love. The teams, the rivalries, the stats, and the trash-talking friends. Friends being a loose term for what Daniel and I are. Your favorite fantasy stars like Kyler Murray, Chris McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Baker Mayfield, who we just discussed, they all rely on body armor to get them to the next level and perform at their best and give you the trash-talking points you need. Chris McCaffrey, friend of the podcast, Chris McCaffrey, joined us last week. He was great. Hey, this fall is a great time to up your game as well. Body Armor has got you covered. Everybody is focused on staying active and healthy. Well, not everybody, but most people are. Hydration, of course, an important part of that. It's more than just a sports drink, Daniel. It's made with potassium-flavored electrolytes, antioxidants, and there are no, count them, no artificial sweeteners, flavors, or dyes.
Yes.
Now through December 31st, buy any one Body Armor product, upload your receipt at bafootballtailgate.com, bafootballtailgate.com, and you'll be entered for a chance to win one of hundreds of amazing prizes for your next tailgate. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited, open to residents of U.S. 18 and older. I got a fridge stocked with Body Armor at home. It is delicious.
Delicious. You are very hydrated right now, I can tell.
Dude, you have no idea.
I think that's a part of why you're in such a good mood, because you're hydrated
such
so
a
well.
good mood because I'm so hydrated. I may have to use the little analyst's room in about 10 minutes.
Nope. You can hold it until we're done with the show. Sorry. Everything is just an excuse to try and get out of the show. Let's talk about some running backs.
You're on to my evil.
I have been on
my
your
devilish plan.
Yes, for a long time. All right, let's talk about some insurance running backs coming out of the draft.
Sir.
I want to talk about the top 6 running backs that we had on the board and look at if their insurance backs were drafted or not, their top backups. So I want to start with Christian McCaffrey, 101 overall. His backup, Chuba Hubbard, was undrafted in 86% of leagues, Matthew. Is CMC the kind of, is Chuba Hubbard the kind of running back that needs to be rostered if you are a CMC manager?
I think absolutely. Because I think that when you look at sort of the roster moves and some of the other players that the Panthers cut, it's very clear that Hubbard is sort of a one-for-one replacement should anything happen to McCaffrey. And we obviously hope that nothing does. But, you know, there are certain teams that, like, if that player went down, it'd be sort of a committee to replace them. You know, like I think if something happened to Derrick Henry, like I think Tennessee would use a multiple, like, because there's no one like Derrick Henry. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that Hubbard is like Christian McCaffrey, but I'm just saying, like, I think the way that team is built, the backup to McCaffrey, Hubbard, would get a lot of that same workload. Whereas, but I think if something happened to Derrick Henry, I think it would be multiple running backs as well. So give me Hubbard for Christian McCaffrey.
Let me ask you, wait, really quickly.
Right.
Hold on before you move there.
Yes.
If you are a CMC manager, you're saying give me Hubbard. What if you aren't a CMC manager and he's still out there? Is he a kind of insurance back that is worth picking up off of the waiver wire?
I think there are other, I mean, it just sort of depends on.
Because they're two different contexts, and I understand roster, you know.
So it's sort of, I don't mind guys like that. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't mind having upside backup running backs that if anything were to happen to the starter in front of them, that they would suddenly have a lot of value. Like Alexander Madison, who's backing up Dalvin Cook. Alexander Madison should be rostered in 100% of leagues because if anything, Dalvin Cook is somebody that has struggled with injuries throughout his career, and Madison would be very productive if and when something were to happen to Dalvin Cook. I think every Dalvin Cook manager should have Madison on the roster, but if not, then he should be rostered by somebody else. What are you thinking, Stephania?
I agree with you 100% on that. My question goes back to the Carolina situation. You know, they signed Royce Freeman this week. So there's somebody else there. Now, Hubbard's going to be likely their kick returner. And I like Hubbard. I saw him in camp, and that is actually what drew my attention to him because I didn't know that much about him ahead of time, and I like him. But it's not like he's the only one. Like, they were adding depth by bringing in Royce Freeman. I think Hubbard might be the preferred, but I don't know that it's a lock.
Yeah, I mean, it's my own personal opinion on Royce Freeman versus Hubbard,
Yeah.
who's an exciting player out of college. I mean,
Right.
So.
for
He's
whatever
got
it's worth,
the upside,
for
but
whatever it is worth, in
I
the
still think
Dynasty,
the role could be divided.
I understand. For whatever it is worth, and I may be dead wrong on this. There's a first time for everything. First time for everything.
I love you.
But all of us, myself, you, Daniel Dopp, you, Stephania Bell, Field Yates, Mike Clay, Thirsty Kyle, and a number of other people are all in a dynasty league here internally at ESPN. We have a 12-team dynasty league.
Correct.
And some of the producers of some of the shows and everything like that. So it's a very competitive league. I have Chris McCaffrey in that dynasty league. I drafted in the rookie draft this year. I have Hubbard. I am not seeking out Royce Freeman to add to my. I mean, again, it's a super deep.
Sure.
It's a super deep league. It's 12 teams. I think it's 25-man rosters. Like it goes fairly deep. But I'm not worried about Royce Freeman. So I mean, I have Mike Davis on my team because I had him last year.
Sure.
For McCaffrey, I have Hubbard this year for McCaffrey, and I obviously have Mike Davis now in Atlanta. But yeah, I guess I'm not. I understand the concern of bringing that up, Stephania. I don't know. Royce Freeman hasn't shown me a lot.
Yeah, even in redraft leagues, I think I agree with you. Hubbard is the kind of guy that I would love to be able to find a way to get onto my roster, especially if I'm a CMC manager. We already talked about Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison. We're 100% on the same page. Madison needs to be rostered, hopefully by the Cook manager, but even if not, he should be rostered by somebody in your league. If he's out there, go out there and pick him up.
I mean, I always talk about this. It's these players are the kind of guys that I talk about in my draft day manifesto, where I talk about roster players on your team that can either help you win every week or help you win 1 week.
Yeah.
Because like one of the next guys we'll talk about here, like Tony Pollard, we're talking about Ezekiel Elliott early in the year, early in the show. Tony Pollard is one Ezekiel Elliott hamstring away from being a top 5 fantasy running back. And the more important thing here is that you'll know when to start Tony Pollard. It's the weeks when Zeke is out.
Yep.
Right. I mean, unlike the example I used in the article was Nyheim Hines. Nyheim Hines had 3 or 4 really great games last year, but they were weeks 1, 7, 8, and 12. And I could have that wrong. I'm doing it off the top of my head, but it was no rhyme or reason.
You have no idea when
week
they're
1,
coming.
he had 21 fantasy points.
Yep.
Everyone that started him in week 2, and he had 1.4 fantasy points. It was just sort of he flukily scored 2 touchdowns in week 1, did nothing in week 2. Whereas when Aaron Jones was out last year, you knew to start Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams was a top 10 fantasy running back the 2 weeks that Aaron Jones was out. So it's like the Tony Pollards of the world, the Alexander Madisons, the Chuba Hubbard. I like, so there's guys like that where we think it's a 1-for-1 replacement of that player. And while they're not as good as the player in front of them, they would get a lot of run on a good offense. I really like Damian Williams, by the way, who's David Montgomery's backup.
I agree with you there.
Because I think that's a talented running back. That's a guy that should have been the MVP of the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I've been grabbing him a lot in a lot of my deeper leagues. 10-team ESPN standard leagues, it's tough to be able to find a spot for him.
with you.
But in some of the deeper leagues, I love him as one of my later running backs. Okay, so those 3 running backs I think we agree on, CMC, Dalvin, and Zeke. Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray has always been that insurance back, and we've seen it for a long time. But this year, Tony Jones kind of popped a little bit in the preseason, and I'm curious, does one of these 2 need to be rostered? And if there is, one of them does, which one do you like more than the other to roster behind Alvin Kamara?
I don't know if needs to be rostered. I mean, the fact is that Kamara missed just 4 games in his career, right? So he's, a very healthy running back. Having said that, I think I prefer Jones to Murray at this point. There were rumors that Murray might not make this team.
Yeah.
That he was on the roster bubble. It appears, again, and you never know with Sean Payton, I guess we'll sort of see, but it feels like Jones is ahead of Murray. I don't mind picking Jones because, by the way, Murray has had standalone value. I think they're going to be, especially with Michael Thomas out for the first 6 weeks, I think they're going to be more run heavy than people think. Now, I know they named Jameis the starter. It's not Taysom Hill, so they may throw more, but I still think they're going to be more run heavy than people think, even with Winston under center. And so I do think Jones has some flex appeal in 12-team or deeper leagues.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, but do they need to be rostered? I probably would say no.
Probably no. In 10-team standard, I think I agree with you.
Yep.
But you're looking at 12 teams. But he is absolutely a guy that you're saying I'm keeping my eye on him.
And Jones is out there in a zillion leagues.
Yes. Only drafted in 2% of leagues, so he's absolutely out there. Someone that you want to watch out there on the waiver wire. What about Saquon's backup? Devontae Booker. I mean, that's a guy that we've talked about. I mean, Saquon, obviously, Stephania, we've talked about the injury history. We know that that's going to be something that he's going to have to deal with this year. We've heard that he's on track to be able to play week 1. Has anything changed with that?
I don't think anything changed. In fact, I think that story has been floated for like 2 weeks now. So I feel like it's the same report every single day. They said Wednesday would be a big day. We're on Tuesday right now. Wednesday, another padded practice. Joe Judge saying he wants to reserve the right to see how he comes through the week. I thought, by the way, Joe Judge's comment talking to reporters yesterday, very interesting because there was a hint. Somebody didn't say Saquon's name, but they were talking about if you have a player who's coming off injury, the question was sort of posed about a guy who you might not use at full strength. I don't remember exactly how the question was framed, but Judge's response was, I can only control volume and not intensity. So he only wants a guy who he feels comfortable can play at 100%. He can limit the volume, but he's not going to try and have a guy play at less than 100%. I understand that. It's actually a very good approach. The challenge will be that I believe that if they do bring Saquon back on Sunday, which they might, that it will be the first test, the first dipping of the toe in the pool against real contact. And I do think they'll limit the volume. I understand why you guys are saying you start him anyway if you draft him. You could. My question back to you would be, would you start Devontae Booker as well if you thought for sure Saquon was going to be limited this first time?
No. Just because Saquon's going to get some touches. You want to answer this one?
No. You're good. We're on the same page.
All right. Yeah, this is Saquon. I mean, like, what you basically are going to have at week 1 is you're going to have a committee.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You're going to have a committee against a tough, behind what we think is going to be a bad offensive line against a tough matchup in Denver.
Longer than week 1.
What?
That may extend longer than week 1.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
I'm with you.
And then they have another game on Thursday night. After.
Exactly.
Okay.
I hear you, sister.
So let me ask this question, Matthew, because I think let's say first round pick came around. I was picking at the 8th spot, and I took Saquon Barkley.
Sure.
Understanding everything that Stephania is talking about and what we're talking about, that there will be a committee because Saquon is not fully healthy.
Right.
Do I have to roster Devontae Booker in order to make sure that I at least have something from that backfield? Or do you just...
So people are very different split on this, right? And as to whether or not you should have insurance. And by insurance, I mean like the backup running back to your number 1 pick in essence.
We covered the ones that we like a lot.
Right. There's one other one that I think is interesting. But so I'm a believer in that because it's one of those things that's like, it's like actual insurance, right? Like you don't like writing that check every month, but then, you suddenly, somebody plows into your car and you're like, thank God I have it. Mm-hmm. Right. So the same thing, like you hope, it's like, right. You hope everyone stays healthy. You hope you never have to use this backup running back, but Chris McCaffrey's going to miss all these games. I'm glad I have Mike Davis as opposed to having to go to the waiver wire and try to beat out 9 other people or blow my fab budget or whatever it is to try to get that backup running back. Like, sure. I think, so I would rather that. I mean, there's all sorts of arguments about like, you're basically, you're locking in it's risk averse versus high upside, because if let's pretend you have McCaffrey and you don't roster Hubbard, and if something happens to McCaffrey and you're not able to get Hubbard, but instead of Hubbard you roster Madison. So the argument there is that if something happens in Dalvin Cook, now you have McCaffrey and Madison. You have 2 top 5-ish fantasy running backs there, right? So there's more upside in rostering the backup to a running back that you don't have. There's more upside there. There obviously is. But there's a lot more safety in. Sure. So, and it's just like first round pick is a big investment. And I want to protect my investment as much as possible. In an ideal world, you have both. You have Hubbard or whoever you have Madison if you have Dalvin Cook, and then you also have an upside guy, like
able to grab.
Right, like a Tony Pollard or somebody like that. Right?
Last one from this big group. Yeah. Derrick Henry, obviously, I feel like is the lone one in this group that it feels like his backup just doesn't equate to fantasy relevance if he were to come out. Darrington Evans doesn't feel like someone that you need to make sure you have on your roster.
I'm going to interrupt you here because before you even have the conversation, you need to start off by remembering Darrington Evans on injured reserve. So he's not even available for the first 3 games. Jeremy McNichols, who's another running back in the mix, is on the reserve COVID-19 list. So it's not even really clear how a backup situation would be handled in Tennessee right at the moment.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's unclear. People have thought Darrington Evans would be the guy. We've never seen it.
No.
I mean, like, it's all based on speculation. Like, I mean, like, at least with, like, Tony Pollard or Alexander Madison, even Latavius Murray, some of these guys, not necessarily Hubbard because he's a rookie, but we saw it last year with Mike Davis. Like, we've seen like how some of these teams handle their star player going down, and we just have no idea in Tennessee. My feeling there is like, again, that guy's just built differently than everyone else. The things you can do with Derrick Henry, you just can't do with other human beings.
Yeah, agree.
Right? You know, so it's just like, it's insane. I will say that some other just insurance running backs that I'll throw out there real quickly.
Yeah.
And these are guys that I think have value, that will have value on a week-to-week basis in a flex sort of situation. But obviously then if any, and they're some of my favorite targets, because if anything happens to the guy in front of them, there would be, you know, so Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt's going to get work regardless. And everything happens to Nick Chubb. Kareem Hunt's top 10 fantasy running back. A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon's going to get work. Anything happens to Aaron Jones, he's going to be the guy. I don't think there's anyone for Eckler. I think it's a committee between, you know, Justin Jackson and Josh Kelly and Larry Roundtree. So I don't really think anyone with Eckler, but I mentioned Damian Williams for David Montgomery.
Yep.
Like him a lot. I think Boston Scott gets work this year. I mean, like, one of the reasons I'm out on Miles Sanders this year is I do think Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell eat enough into Sanders' workload.
Not enough to be rostered in 10-team leagues, but enough to
probably
pull
not,
some
but I
value
do think
away.
Boston Scott gets some work, and I think I get it, he's small, but they like him there.
Yeah.
They like him there, and they're not scared to, like, use him in the middle of the line. Again, remember, you know, Sirianni, when he was with the Colts, he used multiple running backs multiple times. Marlon Mack, I think, is interesting for Jonathan Taylor.
Marlon Mack is only drafted in, I believe, 4% of leagues out there everywhere.
But one other guy, I don't think there's anyone in Pittsburgh.
No,
I mean, like, you know, if something were to happen to Harris.
And a lot of those guys that you mentioned, and not to, but like a lot of those guys are already or were drafted because they're big names that we're talking about. It's tough to find running backs that are less than 50% drafted or rostered that we think have any value. Is there anyone else under that 50% threshold?
I'll mention, like, not somebody that should be rostered, but just a name to have on people's radars is Jarrett Patterson in Washington.
Okay.
Because if anything were to happen to Gibson, it wouldn't be McKissick. McKissick's a third down, like he's a satellite back. That's how they use him. But they let Peyton Barber go, and he went to the Raiders because of how well Patterson has played so far in camp. So just a name to keep on people's radars. But one guy that I think is really interesting here, and this is a roster move that we didn't really talk about on the show yet, and that's Wayne Gallman. Wayne Gallman gets released by Stephania's 49ers. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who was very productive last year for the Giants. Right? This is a guy who had, 147 carries last year, averaged 4.6 yards per carry, had 6 touchdowns, was usable. On a bad Giants team, Wayne Gallman was viable last year in fantasy. For his career, when he gets 15 or more touches, he averages 15.5 fantasy points per game. And he gets signed by Atlanta. One of the pro Mike Davis arguments this year was that, hey, he's got nobody there. There's no competition in that backfield. Really worried about Kadri Allison, and they released Javian Hawkins, and it's the Mike Davis show. And I still believe that. However, I think the leash got a little bit shorter on Mike Davis. I think he's still the starter. I think he's still of the value. I like him. But if anything were to happen to Davis, Gallman is a good running back in the NFL and would be productive. And he's better than, by the way, any of the other guys that they had in Atlanta. So I think there's suddenly competition now for Davis that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
So I think he's kind of an interesting guy because
someone to keep an eye on.
He's got a cleaner path to playing time than some of the other guys that we're talking about. Yeah.
Wayne Gallman looked really good in training camp. The 49ers actually really liked him. It was just a question of, with them keeping 4 running backs, they needed special teams contribution. That wasn't Wayne Gallman's role. So that was part of the reason he got released. They actually really liked him. So it's not a knock on the player at all.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, the guy was productive in college, and when he's gotten a chance in the pros, he's produced. And so I just think he's an interesting guy. That's not a roster move that got a lot of publicity, and just sort of put on people's radars, especially, by the way, if you have Mike Davis. Last one I'll just sort of mention, and we'll move on real quickly, is Malcolm Brown. I think Myles Gaskin's going to be the guy for the Dolphins. And I know they've got Savon Ahmed as well, but Malcolm Brown's going to wind up with 4 to 6 touchdowns this year.
Please no.
I know. I love Myles Gaskin. I love Myles Gaskin. Made my love list, but I'm just saying.
It's nothing against Malcolm Brown either. No.
It'd be interesting. He's not somebody that I'm saying you should go out and pick up, but I just think that's an interesting situation in Miami because I think Savon Ahmed actually had some nice run last
looked
year.
good.
When Gaskin was out last year. So there's a chance that if something were to happen to Gaskin, Ahmed would take that role and Malcolm Brown would just stay still in his same third down role, short yardage role, etc. But Miami situation is just an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Did you actually did you hear how Wayne Gallman got signed by the Falcons?
I did not.
They use ZipRecruiter. Professional leagues go through a rigorous process, that's not true, do not fact check that, to select the best athletes for their team. But what if you had to put the tools, what if you had the tools to put that type of rigor into your hiring process? Well, you've got them when you use ZipRecruiter. And right now, you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/06010. So how does ZipRecruiter scout the best and brightest for your team? Its matching technology scans resumes across its network of millions of job seekers to find qualified candidates for your open roles and proactively presents them to you. Then you can easily review recommended candidates and invite your top choices to apply for your job, which encourages them to apply faster. No wonder 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to this exclusive web address, ZipRecruiter.com/06010. That's ZipRecruiter.com/06010. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
Did you know Tony Romo is a motivational speaker now?
What?
All this football season, Tony and Corona are Romovating football fans to live the game day good life. Is it Romovating? Remotivating?
Remotivating.
That's what it is, because motivating, but remotivating.
But it's, yeah.
Remotivating.
Remotivating.
All right,
English
sorry.
is hard.
It's all right. Tony's a friend of yours. That's no big deal.
It's my second language. Anyway, all this football season, Tony and Corona are remotivating football fans to live the game day good life. Let Tony unlock your football fan potential at remotivation.com. There you can launch an augmented reality experience that will put Tony in your living room or at the bar next to you while you watch the game. It's true, you can be better at watching football. Let Romo and Corona show you how to live the game day good life. Visit remotivation.com now. Please drink responsibly. Corona Extra Beer, imported by Crown Imports, Chicago, Illinois.
You know what? I got to tell you, Matthew Berry, your son's got a fridge full of body armor at home. It sounds like you need a fridge full of Corona at
Sounds
home.
like it.
How does that sound?
It sounds
I need
really
some
good.
Motivation.
Oh, you need some motivation
Yeah.
too?
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah. Does Corona have a wine division? Stefania would like that.
You know what? I'm down with Corona.
Yeah.
When I boondoggle to Cabo, I only drink.
I mean, let's be clear. I mean, listen, you guys know I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan. Like, what do you do when you're drinking? When you're on the beach, what are you drinking, right?
Corona with a lime.
Obviously.
Okay. All right.
All right.
All right. Let's keep on talking about this. Let's talk about some pass catchers here. This is going to be another 2-part question, Matthew. This one's it's tough. A lot of the wide receivers that are out there that weren't drafted, there are roles to them that they could have to be able to find ways to fantasy relevance, but it's difficult because there's so many high upside players that we like this year. So, Are there any wide receivers that currently went undrafted that need to be rostered right now in standard 10-team ESPN leagues when you look at the list of who is rostered in less than 50% of leagues?
I think Tyrell Williams is interesting for your Detroit Lions. Tyrell Williams has been productive when he's gotten an opportunity. He was productive last year with the Raiders. When he was healthy with the Raiders, I should say. He was productive when he was healthy with the Raiders. So Kyle notes that Marvin Jones led the Detroit wide receivers last season with 7.3 targets a game. Now, listen, it's a different quarterback, it's a different system, blah, blah, blah. But just go with us here for a second.
Sure.
Marvin Jones led Detroit wide receivers last season with 7.3 targets per game. In his career, when Tyrell Williams gets at least 7 targets, he's averaging 14.3 fantasy points per game. Again, this is a team that we think is going to be throwing a lot. We think he's the number 1 wide receiver.
They should be down quite a bit.
They should be down quite a bit.
Yep.
I still think that passing offense goes through Hawkinson, but I do think Tyrell Williams is going to be the number 1 wide receiver on a team that will, be throwing quite a bit. 2 other guys that I would mention here. I think the Bills' offense is going to be crazy pass happy, and everyone knows Stephon Diggs, obviously, but I think the Bills are going to be 3 and 4 wide almost every single play.
Yeah.
So I think Emmanuel Sanders and Gabriel Davis are both really interesting players because I think both guys are going to play a lot of snaps. And again, one of the most pass-heavy offenses in the NFL. There's not really a tight end there that you think is going to get a big target share. So those 3 guys, Diggs is obviously a top 15 pick this year.
Of course.
But Sanders and Gabe Davis are both guys that I think are going to be much more productive than people appreciate this year. And the last guy I'll mention here is, again, banged up, But Elijah Moore, if, all the reports are this kid is special. Like everyone that goes to Jets camp comes away going like, or that has seen him, just like, ooh, hey now. And so I think I'm buying the hype a little bit, I guess, on Elijah Moore.
Yeah.
So, I mean, loved his college tape.
Yeah.
Loved his college tape and just, hearing what everyone's talking about. I'm in. Certainly worth a pickup to see if the hype meets the reality.
Absolutely. And I'm with you on, and not to be a Lions homer, but the idea that like there's a number one wide receiver on an offense that is unrostered right now. You would think that there's at least value there if you need it. I understand the upside isn't there maybe as much. I love those Buffalo wide receivers myself, so I'm totally with you on that. Stephania, want to ask you, do you have any wide receivers that you currently like that were undrafted in more than 50% of leagues you want people to look at?
Yeah, and I think they're just people to look at right now. I don't necessarily think they need to be drafted, but Paris Campbell, he gets a bump up in the situation now for the Colts with T.Y. Hilton sidelined on injured reserve because of a neck injury, and Paris Campbell was making some plays in training camp. He is a factor on the team. Injuries have really limited him, so I think people just sort of write him off. But as a slot receiver, Kyle gave me an interesting little nugget for you guys. In 2017, under Frank Reich, Carson Wentz led the slot position with 8.5 fantasy points per game. Led the position in the league with that stat. So Carson Wentz, Paris Campbell, maybe he looks for him more. I think he gets a little bit of a bump. Again, like I said, with T.Y. Hilton out. And then A.J. Green, I know. He's senior citizen when it comes to wide receivers, but I think new face in a new place. I really think he's fired up with having this opportunity in Arizona alongside DeAndre Hopkins, and all the reports have been he looks like a new guy in camp, and you never know what a change of scene can do for someone. He's still got a lot of talent. He's not got the speed that he used to have. I understand that, but I think A.J. Green could be somebody to look at certainly in the very, very latest rounds. I think in one league that I drafted, I got him in the 15th or 16th round.
I'll just say if I'm taking a non-Hopkins flyer on an Arizona wide receiver, give me Rondale Moore. That would be my guy. I think A.J. Green's done, personally.
Well,
I could be wrong.
Hopkins has
I hope I'm wrong
about that.
I'm sure. Listen, I get that. Listen, and I thought it was a good signing for Kyler Murray and for the offense. I think fantasy value-wise, I would prefer Rondale Moore to A.J. Green, but we will see how it all plays out.
We shall. I think that's one of the challenges, quite frankly, with the Arizona offense is that we don't really know where it's going to go, and that's with the running backs and the wide receivers, so a little bit hard to predict out there.
And I realize we're going to talk about tight ends here in a second, but one of the things that's been frustrating for me this offseason is that it's been and there's just only a few, Matthew.
Yeah, of course, it's been a good offseason.
It's been a good offseason. But one of the things that's been frustrating for me this offseason is the idea that there's so little football, meaningful football, that we're able to watch so many of these players play. And I feel like we're going in almost as blind as we did last year, where it's like, and this is, again, just me because I watched all the Lions preseason games. Jared Goff played a quarter in week 1 of the preseason. You have no idea what that Lions offense is going to look like.
You got no idea.
Quarter more than he played with Sean McVay.
And he's not even like a superstar. Like there are Aaron Rodgers didn't play at all. Devontae, so it's like, what do you? There's
you
so
don't
much
really
that you
know how
don't
things
know.
are going to look, how they're going to click.
Welcome to
And in some of the cases, like if you look at Baltimore, to me, this is really interesting because they haven't all played together because everybody, Lamar Jackson was out with COVID-19 for a while. The wide receivers have all been banged up. They have not had, and then they of course, they lost J.K. Dobbins to an injury. I really think the Baltimore offense is one that I'm very curious to see how it looks because I don't know how in sync you can be when you haven't had all your guys on the field at the same time.
It's a great question, Stephania, and one that we will see play out. It makes our jobs that much more difficult, so everyone at home should feel sorry for us.
Yes.
Should feel bad for us.
Please feel bad for us.
How tough it is talking fake football. All right. Hey, by the way, just to clean something up here, Thirsty Kyle texted me, Baker Mayfield, weeks 12 through 17 last year was QB 9. I said QB 7. He was actually QB 9.
He was a top 10 quarterback.
He was a top 10 fantasy quarterback from week 12 on last year.
That's fair.
Mayfield was. So just cleaning that up. Thank you, Kyle.
All right.
Let's move on to tight ends.
Yeah, which tight ends rostered, and it's tough. The fall off for tight ends happens quick and it happens fast, and it is deep, I feel like. Are there any draftable tight ends that when you look at who's available right now in more than 50% of leagues that you like?
Yeah, I mean, there are. Gerald Everett's somebody that I've talked about quite a bit throughout the preseason. Again, no Greg Olsen there. Gerald Everett, when he has gotten time in Los Angeles, has been productive. He moves to Seattle along with Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron was in L.A. under Sean McVay's staff. Shane Waldron is now the new offense coordinator in Seattle.
Yep.
Here comes Gerald Everett as well. So I think he's an interesting late round tight end. I like him more than some of the others out there. A couple of names that I want to put on people's radar. I don't think they necessarily need to be picked up, but just I want people to hear them and be looking for them because they might be quick waiver ads if you need help at the position. Dan Arnold's been getting a lot of love. Like we think this Panthers offense is going to be sneaky good, at least fantasy wise. And Dan Arnold, more than Ian Thomas, Dan Arnold's been getting, has looked good in camp so far and in the preseason. And so I think he's kind of an interesting late round tight end there in Carolina. Let's see, Mike Triplett. This is somebody that Mike Triplett's talked about. If you follow him on Twitter, does a great job for us covering the Saints. Talked about, with Adam Trotman banged up, Juwan Johnson has sort of, we know somebody's going to be a productive fantasy tight end, or we think somebody's going to be a productive fantasy tight end for the Saints with Jared Cook now in Los Angeles with the Chargers. And so Juwan Johnson, everyone assumed it was going to be Trotman, and including me, and it still may be, right? But he's banged up, and so Juwan Johnson has actually been being used more, and so he's an interesting guy. And then last, two other guys. Hayden Hurst, I think, is really interesting.
Yes.
Look.
Super underdrafted, in my opinion.
Super underdrafted, and I think everyone just assumes because Kyle Pitts is there, oh, never mind with Hayden Hurst. But again, there's so many targets available with Julio Jones now in Tennessee. I think that they run a lot more two tight end sets this year, that Julio's target share goes to Kyle Pitts, and Hayden Hurst basically gets what he got last year, where he was like a top 15 fantasy tight end. So, I mean, if you're digging around in sort of this area, I think Hayden Hurst is more interesting than he probably gets credit for. And then the last one I'll mention here is Donald Parham, XFL superstar.
You love Donald Parham.
I do love Donald Parham. Right, exactly. Go Renegades. Renegades for life. So Donald Parham, 6'8", you can't teach that.
Can't.
But just an athletic guy that flashed in the XFL and has looked good in the few times when he gets a little bit of love here or there, and we just don't know how much Jared Cook has left. So anyway, Parham is somebody that's really interesting. I have him in a couple of dynasty leagues.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that I like a lot.
The only guy really in 10-team leagues that you're looking at out of all those people that you mentioned is Gerald Everett, and everyone else you like as keep an eye on these guys as the season progresses to see what happens. But
deeper leagues, yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Can I add a thought?
You can absolutely add a thought, Stephania.
I like Blake Jarwin. And I know that people are talking about Dalton Schultz because he had to step in when Blake Jarwin got hurt last year. But let's not forget, all the talk last year was about this career year that Blake Jarwin was in line for. And then, unfortunately, he tore his ACL right at the start of the season. So we never got to see it. But he's the better pass catcher. He looked really good in camp when I saw him. He already set up a touchdown in one of the preseason games for the Cowboys. I think that his synchronicity with Dak Prescott is going to pay off, and it's going to build over time. So I don't think he needs to be rostered, but I definitely would look at him as somebody to stream or pick up if you end up with a tight end injury.
Synchronicity is an album by which band?
The Police.
I love you.
Wow.
Nice
That's
job.
a band you've heard
That's
of.
a band you've heard of.
It's a band I've heard of. It's an album I own. It's a concert I've seen.
Good for you.
I've seen the Police in concert. Yeah.
I have too.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm so
I
jealous.
saw him with the Go-Go's.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah.
They're
Wow.
great.
Back
Police
in the
were great.
day.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Can you name the
Zenyatta
members of the
Mandata.
Police?
Oh.
Uh,
Oh, God. You're going to test my reading.
Kenneth
Copeland.
Copeland is the drummer.
Stuart.
Kenneth
Stewart.
Stewart is the drummer.
No.
Stuart Copeland.
Stuart Copeland. Thank
No,
you.
Stuart Copeland's the drummer. Sting's the lead
Obviously
singer.
no Sting, and no. Man, I feel bad.
I don't have recall for such things. So.
All right.
Can't
Well,
believe
we'll move
I
on.
Copeland. I did know Stuart
Wait,
Copeland.
you asked it and you can't answer.
No, I was hoping you guys knew.
Who does that?
I hope you guys
That's
knew.
Terrible. Terrible.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Andy Summers and
Andy
Henry
Summers. Yes.
Padavini.
Oh, yes, Andy Summers. And who else, Kyle?
Henry Padavani.
No, it was Andy Summers. It was the three of them
those
for the
were the
longest time.
three,
That
yeah.
guy probably replaced one of them. But it's the Henry whatever. No, Andy Summers is the guy.
Yeah.
And I knew it. Like I knew as soon as I'd heard it, I'd be like,
Yeah.
yes.
Those are the
Andy
three.
Summers.
Yes.
Andy Summers. Yes.
That's fair.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking of Noah, once you heard it, I heard somewhere that the hottest deal on the internet is at rotopass.com. Is that true?
Dude, so true. Look, what I did is, I like fantasy football sites. I go out there, I peruse them, what content is great. And there's a lot of great content creators out there, make no mistake. But what I did is I culled together what I think are the 6 best sites out there, the ones that I use, the ones that I personally really trust, and that have the best tools, that have the best DFS lineup optimizers, that have the best rankings for Devy and Dynasty and redraft, and the most customizable ranks and analysis and articles. And then I got ESPN Plus to come on board as well, the great ESPN Plus. So you can read, Stephania stuff, Field stuff, Mike Clay stuff. You can watch the fantasy show with Matthew Berry and Daniel Dopp. A new episode coming out on Thursday, our Week 1 preview. And by the way, all of our preseason stuff, all of our last-minute draft advice, our positional specials, our love-hate special, they're all available to stream anytime you want on ESPN Plus, along with, Peyton's Places and NFL Primetime, which is, I love NFL Primetime during the season. It's so amazing. So anyway, all these great shows on ESPN Plus and all the great content you get there. You get a year of ESPN Plus these 5 other great fantasy football sites for one low price. And if you use the promo code 06010, you get 10% off. And you get it for 12 months. So, by the way, if you bought it today, you'll get it for all next draft season as well. Oh. It's literally 12 months. It's like 12 months from the day you buy it.
I like it.
So, you get draft prep for the rest of this week, and you get draft prep for all next year as well.
I like it,
Kinda works
Matthew.
out.
All right.
Or, or if you've already done your drafts, it's analysis that will help you throughout the season.
Bring home that trophy.
What players to rank, what, trade tools, trade evaluators, all sorts of great stuff. Rotopass.com.
Love it. All right, we're going to get into our social questions brought to you by Geico. Whether you rent or own, Geico makes it easy to bundle home and car insurance. Go to geico.com today. This first one is going to come from Brandon. Do you mind picking a tight end to open the season with? Cole Kmet, Zach Ertz, Gerald Everett, or Anthony Ferkser? Matthew Berry. Those are 4 pretty.
I'll say Gerald Everett.
I would probably say Gerald Everett too.
But my second choice to be, again, this is to open the season.
Correct.
Zach Ertz.
Yep.
I agree with that.
I think we all 100%. Thought Zach Ertz would be on another team, but Zach Ertz, 2 years ago, Zach Ertz was one of the top 3 fantasy tight ends. He's
and by
not
the
dead.
way, the fall off last year, forget everything that was going on with the Eagles and their troubles. Zach Ertz was really badly hurt last year and tried to play through an unstable ankle. He got it fixed in the offseason. He worked very, very hard in his rehab. He's probably in better shape than he's been in the last couple of years because of that work. I like Zach Ertz this year, and the Eagles obviously do too. They're keeping him around for a reason.
Yeah, I like it.
All right.
You know what you are, Stephania?
Oh.
Smart.
Correctamundo.
Oh, no. Please, no. Can I go home now?
Yeah. Let's all go home.
Tomatoes wants to know, who do you like most in the 3rd round?
that.
Allen Robinson, David Montgomery, or CEH?
Allen Robinson, CEH, and Montgomery is my 3rd round pick. I have 2nd overall.
CEH.
The truth is that who are your first 2 picks?
Yeah, exactly.
I hate going into draft saying and then in the 3rd round, I'm getting a tight end. Let the draft come to you. You just don't know who's going to be there. Of those 3 players, I will say I think you have them ranked correctly. Robinson, CEH, Montgomery is how I would have those guys ranked. So it just depends on but if you went wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, I'm not saying grab Allen Robinson in the 3rd. Let the draft come to you. And so, yeah, but I have those just in a vacuum. I have those guys ranked that way. Robinson, CEH, Montgomery.
I would agree.
Understand that I could see flipping CEH and Allen Robinson. I'm an Allen Robinson stan. So
I love Allen Robinson too. But you're right. If you went wide receiver, I think CEH would be who I took. If you went running back, I would obviously take Allen Robinson.
Yeah, and if you went running back, wide receiver, then I don't know, is Darren Waller or George Kittle? Did they fall in the 3rd round?
Yeah, who else is coming?
I've seen Kittle fall in the 3rd round in a bunch of drafts.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna do one more real quick. Who do I flex in week 1? Chris Carson versus the Indianapolis Colts, or Brandon Ayuk versus the Lions?
I get it.
Oh.
I'm going with Chris Carson still.
Yeah?
Listen, I think both guys have a really big game here. I get it against Detroit, Ayuk, but I just think the guaranteed touches for Chris Carson. I think it's close, and I get it. Indy's got it. It's a close one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. I'm still going to go Chris Carson. I think he's got the better shot at a touchdown.
Okay.
He falls in the end zone. But, so give me Carson, but it's close.
All right. That's going to do it for today. Thank you very much for watching Fantasy Focus presented by EA Madden NFL. We'll be back to talk ranks and some spicy season-long tanks tomorrow. For Matthew and Stephania, I am Daniel. We love you guys.
Peace out.